Welcome to Tamer Bowling Video Ball Reviews. For all your bowling needs, check out our partner, PerfectAimBowling.com. Okay, we are testing the new Motiv Villain. We're testing on a 40-foot medium-heavy house shot and a 48-foot Eiffel Tower. First impressions, to my eye, the Motiv Villain is a legit benchmark ball. Surprisingly, this slot is not the easiest to fill, and maybe it's my expectations, but if the Villain fits there, it's filling some pretty big shoes. For value, we gave the Villain a B+. The Villain's priced just about at the top end. Nevertheless, bang for the buck in my eyes is gauged by versatility and usability. In this case, the Villain looks like the very nice middle-of-the-road versatile ball. This is a very good score on my scale. Overall, we gave the Villain a B+ on house shot and an A- on sport shot. As I absorbed what I was seeing, it just continued to sink in more and more how good this ball is. The Villain revives the Sinister core, and for those that remember, this core initially released with the Cruel C51 with the lowest RG, max diff, high mass bias. That ball worked well for many bowlers, including myself, but had a very aggressive, asymmetric hook set characteristic. When the 2 Cruel was released, the RG was raised using the same core. So, okay, fine with the history, where are we now? The Villain uses a solid medium strength cover wrapping the higher RG version of this strong core. And despite it being an asym, as we've seen from Motiv recently, the cover smoothness makes the ball reaction look a bit more symmetric, and that's not a bad thing in this case. The ball offers reasonable length with smooth but moderately boomy backend. It's got that reliable motion where you know when it will start to hook and you know how much it's going to move on the backend. It's telegraphic in its motion. The Villain is the kind of ball that can be used on a fresh to blend the over-under, but because it also has a nice reaction off the dry, you can use it a little longer than that heavy oil solid ball. It's still a solid asymmetric, so if you throw it way out into the dry, it'll bleed some energy, and not to punish, but probably leaves a weak corner. Misses in will not hold as the cover is starting the roll phase earlier. I compared it to the Jackal Rising on the same line, and you'll note that the Rising seems to be smoother to transition and doesn't create as strong a backhand and deflects more at the pocket, leaving the 10 pin. Moved 2 and 1 more direct and found that heavy roll from the Rising. And it may seem surprising that the middle of the row ball hooks more, but remember, balls hook relative to the amount of oil on the lanes, and the Rising is just burning up a bit while the Villain's storing more energy. Compared to the Venom Shock Pearl, the Shock Pearl has more punch down lane, clearly storing a bit more energy, giving them a nice relationship. Finally, comparing to the Venom Cobra, the Venom Cobra is a touch smoother than the Shock and looks to split the difference between the Shock and the Villain. I'm just not sure how much room there would be to have all three, to be honest. Bryan was next and he very much enjoyed the Villain. Our first thought was that it bounced off the dry more assertively than we expected, especially for a ball in the left-hand column of Motiv's ball guide. And hitting the dry made the Villain more angular and carried very well. Bryan kept chasing in with various moves to see how the Villain would perform. He made parallel moves to push the break point further into the oil, and it did make the ball smoother, but it still had a nice, very reliable hard arc to the pocket. If he moved in but still tried to get it to the friction, it made a more angular move to the pocket. Bryan's eyes kind of lit up throwing the Villain, to be honest, and in terms of miss room, Bryan saw something similar to what I saw. If you miss out, the ball does burn up but tends to make its way back just enough to the head pin to leave you something makeable. From inside, it just wouldn't hold and more likely to punish. So onto our sport shot test, the 48-foot Eiffel Tower, and long patterns can be played a couple different ways, typically settling into deep lines with breakpoints tight to the head pin. For both testers, the shot only had a couple games on it, but just enough to wear down that tight freshness. From the left side, I try up the boards to start if it plays, and it's tough to play that pattern that way, but I did find a tight line about 10 to 8, and I felt comfortable throwing this piece as much as any solid piece from this line. No ball will hold missing in from this line, but it gave me a reasonable space to the pocket. I couldn't miss to 10 for sure, but missing to 6, and I still at least saw, back to the head pin. So I had a nice slot to 7 or 8, maybe 9, not a lot of room, but this is a tough shot. Bryan again really liked the Villain on this pattern as well, and he started trying, very direct 12 to 12, which is his go-to with strong pieces, and quickly found the villain is too much. He made a couple of adjustments to find the line and found himself going, plus or minus 14 to 10 with a really good look. He was surprised by how much angle the villain generated on this pattern, as he typically has to close the down lane angles quite a bit on this long pattern. And this allowed him to relax. Again, he knew exactly what he was getting with every shot thrown, no surprises. Miss a little, and it translated quite easily.
Oh yeah.
So final thoughts, we test a lot of balls, and while every manufacturer touts the latest and greatest, I keep looking for that ball they claim as the benchmark and how it'll hold up. The Motiv Villain looks like it fills that slot, and I actually think Motiv might be undercutting itself by putting it fully in the left side of their ball guide. Given the 4 lines they now have when you look at that guide, this is at least one right over from where it is now, in my opinion, especially considering where the Havoc and Venom Shock sit. This means that more bowlers will like this ball. It's smooth and controllable, but misses out don't completely die. And for a benchmark, I look for a ball that is 2/3, meaning the transition happens about 2/3 down lane. It starts the transition just before the break point and is smoothly but booming exiting out of the pattern. This way you don't fully rely on drive boards to see motion like skid flip or ball roll like early rollout. Alright, this is all very technical, but that's what makes this a proper benchmark and we like it.
I need to tell you what Tamer Bowling Ball reviews are. Yeah.